Um, the group that put that together was a very large partnership table. It had the regional health authorities on it, it had the universities, it had the other post-secondary institutions, it had 2 or 3 different provincial departments, FNIB, what I represented, the unions. I'm probably forgetting a few, but it was, I think if everybody showed up, we needed a large room, as big as this room, to meet in, because it was like 50 people if we were all there. And that large table put that day together to try to paint the picture. And as I went to those meetings and became involved with the initiatives, this is the picture that I got of the overall Aboriginal workforce initiatives in the health sector. Wayne's going to talk about the Aboriginal workforce initiatives beyond the health sector, but my lens is primarily in the health sector. As I mentioned, the buzzword was partnership. Nothing happened except through a partnership. The partnerships were formed locally, they were formed provincially through the big table that I talked about. There was also preparing the workforce. The idea of Aboriginal awareness training was that it wouldn't matter how many Aboriginal people you hired, if they encountered a lot of racism in the workplace, you were going to have a very high turnover. You wouldn't successfully retain Aboriginal people. So the idea of the Aboriginal awareness training was to try to prepare the workplace and break down myths and misconceptions so that hopefully the workplace would be more receptive. There were also all these different employee development strategies. There were entry-level type programs that were started by places like the Regina Work Preparation Center and comparable programs in Saskatchewan, which were basically taking Aboriginal people who were just barely trying to get back out of welfare or back off various types of healing strategies and into the workforce. And so they would get entry-level positions, which hopefully they could move up from by coming into the health sector that way. But then to go beyond just the entry level was career pathing, which was quite an elaborate strategy. It was holistic. It was intended to look at the whole person, not just the resume or the work experience, but the whole person, and support that individual in developing a path that worked out that would make sense both for the individual and for the employer. So those were the 3 large components, as I saw them, of the representative workforce strategy. And of course, all of this is now up in the air. To fast forward to today, as of March 31st, we're not sure what happens to any of this because the provincial office in Seho that was supporting all of this is closed, and the Aboriginal Employment Development Division within First Nations and Métis Relations is gone. So we don't know what the status of any of this is. Right now, this is all we can say for sure is that this is how it was. We're not quite sure where it's going to be in the future. Okay, I said that I came up with some interesting research, and I think when you see the research together with the experience that people have of this, you begin to see some clear pictures. A couple of master's theses that I came across. Susan Pentelachuk, if I'm saying that correctly, 2001, looked at the apprenticeship system. And what she was looking at, she did interviews, long interviews, with a number of Aboriginal people, some of whom were female. I think it was half and half, actually. And she was trying to identify from their perspective barriers to their entry into the apprenticeship system and trying to figure out why the apprenticeship system was largely dominated by young white males. And the conclusion was that it was fine. The apprenticeship training model of learning was fine. It was a great idea, actually, because you learned from a mentor. You got to learn by doing. It wasn't just book learning, it was applied learning. and you got to presumably develop a good relationship with a mentor. So the model was okay, it's just that the workplace culture of apprenticeship only worked if you were young and white and male. It was basically more of a cultural issue than a training issue. In other words, if you did some cultural adaptation of the apprenticeship model, you could conceivably get more women and Aboriginal people working in apprenticeships. They didn't object to the idea, it was the practice that they had a problem with. So that was one interesting study. Another one was from 2003, again from U of R, master's degree in vocational technical education. And Mr. Klein interviewed people who were directly connected to the Aboriginal Employees Network within the province of Saskatchewan. So these were people who worked for Crowns or worked for mainline departments. I believe there was about 15 of them. And collectively, they identified these 5 barriers to Aboriginal employment and retention. A lot of them experienced either subtle or blatant racism. There were also issues with recruitment and selection processes that they felt were discriminatory. This is one that is of interest to us because I think it's come up as well in the research that we've been looking at, that there's a gap between the actual policies are and how things are actually practiced when you experience them in the workplace. So for instance, just to give one short story from one of the interviews, when this Aboriginal awareness training was going on, one of the sort of backlash things that the Aboriginal employee got was a coffee shop kind of a backlash thing where she was told, you know, we didn't have any problems until this Aboriginal awareness training started. You know, it was a touchy sort of thing. Subtle, maybe even blatant racism there, but what they were talking about eventually was this gap between the official policy and these sorts of highfalutin documents that talk about the representative workforce strategy and the actual practice in the workplace, that there was a gap there. The other issue they identified was that once you got the sort of below the, above the entry-level positions, there were very few Aboriginal people in decision-making positions. And then this one, which was interesting, they felt that there was actual confusion about what was really meant by a representative workforce. They felt that people were still confused. Was this employment equity? Was this diversity? And what do those words mean? And are we trying to develop a representative workforce based on a local percentage like Regina or Saskatchewan? How do we judge what is representative? And they felt the policy was a little fuzzy because of that. This one was a national study. It was done by Turtle Island Consulting Services in 2007. And it looked at all these different types of initiatives across the country, not just in Saskatchewan, but everywhere in the country, trying to effectively engage Aboriginal people. And it was a large study, part of which dealt with our issues today of developing a representative workforce. And the key point I want you to get out of this is that it was telling Saskatchewan that they were on the right track.